Let's take you to this now. This week saw the departure of Floyd Shivambu from the Economic Freedom Fighters. Shivambu announced that he is joining the uMkhonto weSizwe political party. He has been with the EFF since its founding in 2013. Political analyst Sanusha Naidu joins us now via video link to weigh in on this story and other political stories making headlines. Sanusha, thank you so much for your time. Let's first then start by unpacking the possible implications that Floyd Shivambu's resignation will have on the EFF. Firstly, just given how instrumental he was in the party's founding and how he has for several years been defined as the intelligence behind the EFF's rise to power over the past 11 years.
Good afternoon, Nati. Good afternoon to the viewers. Yes, I think you perfectly captured the issue in terms of what does this mean, both for the EFF but also for the MK party, and more importantly, I think for the political landscape of our opposition. Because remember, the election kind of reconfigured our opposition landscape, particularly with the GNU and the fact that the DA, as the largest opposition party to date before the election, played that role. So now you've got the MK party, which has been officially designated as the opposition party in the country by Parliament. So obviously that's going to be important to watch, both in terms of the impact that this has on the EFF, in terms of its Parliament, in terms of its role in Parliament, and more importantly, in terms of how it articulates and constructs its narrative. At the same time, what does this mean in terms of the MK party? Because as much as it is important to recognize the value proposition that Floyd Shivambu brought to the EFF, it will also be important to track how that value proposition is then articulated and manifesting in the MK party. And I think it's kind of within those two spaces that is important, because as much as it's about the growth of a political individual or the individual of their political career and their growth path, it's also important to ask the question, I think, in terms of how much of that level of growth will be anticipated within the party that you're going to, and the impact that you will have on that party, because the party that he's going to, the MK party, also has its own internal dynamics. It's not always clear sometimes around the stability of the party. Yes, I think the members of the party will disagree with me on that and say we're stable, but it's been kind of in a very difficult space at times, or challenging space at times. So what you really see is how would that articulate his bringing in what the value proposition it is that he's going to bring in, how he's going to possibly find that space, what it's going to mean for the growth of the MK party. But the other little issue that I think we cannot ignore, which remains as a kind of nagging issue at the back of our minds, is this also a way in which the MK party may be, in a manner, trying to take in most of the opposition parties within the Progressive Caucus and become that dominant force within that landscape?
That is something that has actually been talked about, particularly as we heard this resignation for the first time. But just going back to your point about the structures of the MK party, the role then that Floyd Shivambu will play, especially because the MK party will be scrutinized in terms of its role in Parliament. And we know, of course, that possibly Floyd is the most experienced in as far as those structures are concerned in Parliament, just given the fact that they've had a very significant role as the EFF party. And even if you look at the leadership of the MK party, they don't necessarily have the background that Floyd Shivambu has.
Well, I think, what you've seen to date by the MK party in Parliament is they've stuck to their narrative. They've stuck to how they've articulated this issue of African transformation and, of course, the issue of economic transformation. And I think that's where there's a coalescing between the narrative or the project or the rhetoric and the focus of Floyd Shivambu, even within the EFF. So there's not necessarily, from a rhetorical perspective and from a kind of coalescing of the narrative, there's not a complete disconnect between the EFF and the MK party. They stick to that kind of idea that this democracy hasn't delivered for a kind of substantive economic transformation, and more importantly, what they call a Pan-Africanism. Now that remains kind of the kind of dynamics that allow them to connect in that way. I think where the real issue would be is who's going to come into the space of what Floyd Shivambu's vacated in the EFF. That's the first thing, and that will, as we've noted in the press briefing that was given in the week, that this will happen at the forthcoming conference of the party, which is later in the year. Now, that's going to be important because you've also got not just Floyd Shivambu, you've also got Member of Parliament Ndlozi there as well. Now, obviously, that's going to be important because it's also kind of how you find that fit. Having said that, the issue then remains for the MK party is who they put in with those 15 members that have been asked to vacate their seats in Parliament. Does Floyd Shivambu come back to Parliament as an MK MP? The same thing goes to Mr. Mane. Mr. Mane has also resigned from the EFF and, of course, has also said that he's joining and the MK party has welcomed him as well. So this is going to be interesting. So will they find that kind of compact or fit in Parliament where they don't necessarily challenge each other on how they articulate their oversight, challenge the GNU and oversight on the GNU. But the challenge would actually be internal because, let's be honest, political parties are also about political interests. It's also about personal interest and it's about vested interest. So those kinds of dynamics and whether we're going to see clashes of egos, etc., in the MK party where there's going to be a jostling taking place, I think that is also something we need to look at because that can also become an important indicator, if not a benchmark, to see how the MK party is going to coalesce itself internally, because there could be these personality clashes as well. If indeed, as we say, that some of the value proposition that Floyd will bring to the MK party may be seen as, let's be a bit more cautious because we also have to worry about power struggles within the MK party.
I think this is one of those that we have to closely monitor and watch. Unfortunately, we have run out of time, Sanusha, but thank you so much for unpacking all of that for us. Sanusha Naidu, political analyst, there for us.